And so at this point, I would now like to introduce today's presenter, Marko Muellner, PK's VP of Digital Experience Strategy.
Perfect. Thank you, Elizabeth, so much. And welcome, everybody. Like Elizabeth said, my name is Marko Muellner, and I am the head of our CX practice here at PK. And I'm going to run through what we call our North Star offering, which is one of my favorite kinds of engagements. And it's my hope is that it's one of the first in a series of quick CX webcasts that we're going to do here. We'll kind of take some feedback from folks and adjust as we go, but kind of share out some of the work that we've been doing and some of the things that we're super excited about here at PK around the CX work. So before I dive in, a very quick introduction to PK. If you don't know about us, we're a global experience engineering firm, which in a nutshell means that we really focus on helping our clients become more customer centric and then accelerate their business agility around being responsive to customers. And so there's obviously lots and lots and lots of pieces to that, spanning from experience design and content strategy into deep technology and infrastructure as well. So with that, let me start. We'll dive in. I always love to set a little bit of context for CX as a term and how we think about it more broadly. And then I'll dive into specifically this North Star engagement. But generally, it's pretty well understood at this point that CX is truly kind of an outside-in perspective on your business. It's really truly about how people, usually kind of customers, but we'll talk a little bit about that in a second, perceive their interactions and their experience with your organization. And this is super important kind of to state, because I think most business challenges and opportunities that we have, we tend to think more inside out, and we think about our own challenges and our own problems, but CX always is outside in. And it's really, really important for us to always come back to this. It's always about how can we understand more about how the folks that we engage are perceiving their experience with us. And like I said, it's not just customers, it's easy and it's in the term. And when we talk about customers too, there's obviously a bit of dynamism even within that term. We talk about prospects and existing customers, and there's always, even for some of our clients, a separation between the people who buy products and the people who use products. So customers itself is a big category, but we also like to think about partners as well. So as large partner ecosystems that we tend to engage with in our organizations. And then obviously employees as well. And we tend to think about employees in the CX context primarily about the employees that deliver and manage and optimize customer experiences for customers and partners. But we also tend to think about CX from an employee perspective as actual end customers. There's a lot of work that we do across PK where we're building internal systems or automating processes, really anything, quite frankly, has some sort of user impact. And CX really gives us a toolkit to really think through who's going to use something, what is it that we're trying to get them to do, and then how do we make sure that that's actually happening over time and improving over time as well. So that's the kind of the scope of CX. And then the last framework that we use when we think about CX kind of writ large is we think about CX at the journey level, so the experience that somebody has across a bunch of steps. We also think about then the experiences they have within those specific steps, and I'll go into a bit more detail as we go through the presentation here. And then lastly, the moments, and more specifically, the moments that matter. And again, this will become a little bit clearer as we go into some of the artifacts and some of the activities that we do as part of our North Star engagement. But think of these as kind of getting closer and closer and closer to kind of actual orchestration of experiences kind of across journeys, experiences, and moments. And so that framework of outside in, people, different kinds of people that we engage with, and then thinking about the way that they engage with us, that's really kind of the macro context for how we think about CX. So let's now talk a little bit about this North Star engagement, which is a specific kind of set of tools and approaches that we've pulled together over time in working with all sorts of different clients. And really, it's meant to do a couple of really key things. The first thing that it's really focused on is kind of separating ourselves and all of the work that we do and all of the opinions we have about how we can improve customer experience or internal business processes, and really giving us a set of kind of artifacts and ways to align our teams around a certain set of kind of truths, right? Customer truths. And so it becomes this way of increasingly bringing together teams. It's usually, in our case, it's business teams, marketing teams, customer support teams, and IT teams, and others together around a unified understanding of the customer's experience today, the current state, and then a collaborative workflow and framework for building collaboration and consensus around where we want to go collectively as an organization, and then ultimately creating that roadmap together. What we see so often with our clients is a team, a marketing team has identified a whole bunch of CX issues that they want to repair, and they kind of go about trying to solve them. And then they look up and they've got to try to work with the IT team, but the IT team has a whole different set of expectations and priorities and budgets, and likewise IT, right? And so trying to get those pieces to kind of coordinate can always be a challenge. And so this kind of engagement is really instrumental in helping us do that. The other thing it really helps us do is start to operationalize some of our core CX approaches, and that'll become a little bit clearer as we get into this. But that's the other piece. It's really helping teams, like I said at the outset, become more customer centric. Isn't just about listening and understanding your customers. It's really about building processes internally for capturing insights, understanding journeys, building roadmaps against those journeys, and really being able to test and learn as you go, and having that CX framework. Okay, so let's dive in. I think the title of the webinar is 5 steps. There's actually 6. I apologize. I added one extra at the end, but we'll walk through those now. So the first place that we always start when we sit down with a new client and a new opportunity engagement is with KPIs. I've been doing this kind of work, digital design and digital marketing, for many, many years. And, it's ebbed and flowed over time. Analytics used to be something that we would do, during design, once we understood what it was that we were making, and then we would make measurement plans. All of that is perfect and well and good. The truth is, when we're setting out to solve really key strategic business challenges and customer challenges, understanding what it is that we're trying to accomplish and aligning teams around usually, ideally, a small set of KPIs is an essential first step. And quite frankly, it usually takes a little bit of time, right? When you ask somebody, what is it that we're trying to accomplish, you usually get a handful of different answers. And so aligning, getting the folks in the room and the key stakeholders aligned around a couple of key KPIs that we're trying to accomplish here is always the essential first step. Once we have that, we embark on our current state journey. And so this is where we started to introduce an idea. It's not necessarily a radical idea, but it kind of drafts off of this idea of design thinking. So in the world of design thinking, we take a design approach to solving all sorts of problems, and there's a great kind of robust, mature toolkit. We use a similar model here in journey thinking, and there's a couple of different tools that we'll use as we start to look at the people that we're looking to engage. So who is going to be impacted by this KPI that we're trying to solve, and what is their experience? We tend to think about the matter at hand, and I'll give you an example here in a second. But the truth is, we really challenge our teams and our colleagues, as well as our clients, to take their first impression, this is the thing we are working on, and do an exercise we call bookending, which is now think about what is the experience that the end customer, whoever we're thinking about, what happened before this piece that we're thinking about, what happened after. And then we'll kind of look at that and we'll say, okay, does that seem like the right kind of altitude? Do we really understand the problem that we're trying to solve? Does it incorporate the pieces that we think that we can really make a dent against this KPI that we're trying to impact? Yes, great. Then let's kind of take that. No? Well, what if we add another step? What happened before that? What's their mindset? What is their ecosystem? What do we need to understand truly about what's happening with the people that we're trying to engage as we're pulling them in through this journey? And then even more importantly, how do we think about what happens after they do this thing that we need them to do? Do we need to get them to opt into something? Is there, what's this kind of lifetime value kind of loyalty ecosystem look like when we're thinking about these kind of macro journeys? So journey thinking is really one of the most important pieces that we can use in our CX toolkit as we're starting to think about addressing some of these kind of key pieces. Getting to the right altitude. The KPIs are essential. Getting to that right altitude so that we can address those KPIs is the next really essential piece. Here's a really quick example of what I'm talking about around journey thinking. Working with a client recently, they're a medical device company, and they have a Find a Doctor tool so that they offer to their patients as a way to support their surgeon ecosystem. It's a really important tool. This is what it looks like today. We're in the process of doing this redesign. And we started with, like anything else, okay, we're going to think about this as a tool, a place where somebody comes and fills in a form and gets a list of doctors. Great. Well, as we got into discovery and we started interviewing patients and talking to the business, we started to realize that the process of choosing a doctor, of actually finding the right care provider, is actually pretty complex. And most patients actually know nothing about it. They kind of come in blind. They have maybe a primary care, but then they get referred to a surgeon, but they don't know the questions to ask and things like that. And so this was this bookending exercise, right, where we understood this need to actually search and find, but what happens before? What do they know? What don't they know? How do we think about mindsets and ecosystems and things like that? And so ultimately, we fundamentally changed the way we thought we were going to solve this problem. It's less about this experience and more about this journey. And as you can see, right, it becomes much more about helping somebody through the journey. Hey, we know that this is important. Here, choose your body part. And you can see at the bottom, we also created a way for them to bookmark doctors and follow up with them and print things out, because we know that there's this kind of post-search part where they're going to go and actually talk to doctors and make a decision. Right. So getting to that right altitude, like I said, is a really essential part to really solving these problems. So that first phase of the North Star engagement is really about mapping that current state journey. So we do a handful of different ways of trying to get at these kind of key insights and the ability to kind of map a key journey. We tend to work with clients by picking one or two to start, especially if they're complex journeys, but the methodology applies and you can kind of iterate and operationalize, like I said, a lot of this work. And so we'll go through a process of stakeholder interviews, obviously. We'll do a lot of auditing and looking at systems and being introduced to technology, talking people through so that we can really understand all of the different steps. And as you can see on this journey map, this is just one example of an artifact that we create. And this piece, I'm sure lots of folks on the call here are well-versed in CX and in journey mapping. But the goal here is to do a handful of things, right? Is to capture kind of the macro journey. So you can see here on this one, policy lifecycle. There's kind of three stages. There's kind of the initial engagement stage, this kind of processing stage in the middle, and then this kind of maintain stage at the end. So figuring the macro stuff, but then also really being able to kind of visualize and understand all of the little micro engagements that happen along the path, the journey. And then ultimately now here we're getting into moments that matter. So you can see the stars where we're starting to really understand this is a crucial moment. If this piece for any reason becomes difficult, then it puts everything else at risk, or whatever that is. We have a handful of frameworks that we use for assessing and understanding and identifying kind of all of these different pieces and the moments that matter in particular, so that we can make sure that when we're thinking about kind of the next step, once we've got the current state, as we start to think about solving for some of these challenges, we know kind of the clear places to focus and where some of those crucial moments are. So once we have the current state piece, and again, at each one of these steps, we have alignment sessions, right, where we bring together all of our key stakeholders again. So we aligned around KPIs, and then the next touch point is going to be really around aligning around this first look at the current state journey map, right? And so we want all the different stakeholders in the room. Everybody understands, yep, this is right. Oh, what about this? Can we tweak that? This happens sometimes, right? This is a real challenge. And so then once that's baked, now we've got this artifact, right? It's great. It's current state. It really helps us ground ourselves in how this is going to work. And then the before times, before COVID, right, this would be a really nice artifact to kind of stick on a wall or put in a conference room so a team can kind of have it as reference, and it can be a place to kind of begin to have conversations about kind of what comes next. So once we have our current state journey map, that's when we then transition into starting to do some of the visioning work, right? So what is it that we have identified as pain points, right? So coming out of the work that we do around current state, there starts to be some very clear focus areas that start to bubble up. It's a really fun process, especially if you give people chances to talk about what's working and what's not. There's some really interesting things that start to evolve. And so then we start to gather people, and again, we do this a handful of different ways. What you're looking at here is a virtual workshop. We've obviously been doing a lot of these over the past year, where we bring people together to break the bounds. Okay, we've had a good conversation. We've got a solid understanding of the current state. Now we're going to try to have a little bit more fun and see where we can go in thinking about where we might go next. And like I said, we have a couple of different ways that we do that. Sometimes we'll set some time horizons. Sometimes we'll just put people in a room and say, here's the problem, solve this specific problem. In this case, right, advisors' confidence in the overall process, that had been identified during the current state work as a potential place where we might focus and try to make some improvements. And so we'll sit with small teams in breakouts. We'll do some sticky work collaboratively, and do some dot voting, and just start to kind of pull together ideas and start to kind of create a bunch of clay on where we might go in the future to help drive some of our CX practices. What tends to emerge, and it's not always the same every time, but what tends to emerge from this next session, these sessions and workshops that we conduct with different stakeholders, is always really important, again, to have cross-discipline teams in these workshops, is a handful of kind of buckets of places where we need to start making some considerations and start thinking about what the work is that we're going to do and that we're all going to sign up for. So obviously there's customer experience improvements that come out, right? Hey, this tool is just not working, or this experience is broken. They run into the problem every single time. This has got to be fixed. There's a lot of those. Those are usually pretty well known. Sometimes and oftentimes we're trying to push through those known ones and really get to some bigger CX improvement ideas. Always there's opportunities for technology modernization, for new tools potentially, for thinking about integrations and APIs in a new way to drive CX. That's one of my favorite changes and evolutions that I've seen over the years as we've done CX work with clients is going through an exercise with our API leads to map the ecosystem of data that we can extract from the enterprise to inform design. Right? Usually it's the other way around. Sometimes we have design that comes up with great ideas, and then we try to find the technology to solve that, and then we try to do that mapping. And really getting in the habit of doing that work early, it really changes the complexion of how designers think when they have an understanding of what data they can potentially bring forward. And when I say data, I mean not only numbers, but all sorts of things, right? Customer service tickets, bringing them into a dashboard, for example. Who knows? There's a million other things that when you do this kind of inside out work early, that you can really bring to the forefront and try to change the way you think about some of the CX work that you're planning to do. And then obviously measurement optimization is essential to the work that we do. Any KPI, by starting with a KPI, we're inferring that this is something we're going to measure. We're going to understand where we are today, and we're going to make, accelerate our improvement against those KPIs. And so understanding kind of what infrastructure, what strategies are already in place around measurement, and then really building a plan, not only for that infrastructure. For many of our clients, there's a lot of eye-opening that happens when we start to peel back the onion around measurement and trying to understand how we're going to ultimately understand the success of our CX programs. And then lastly, the really important part is the enablement piece and the people and processes that are required to really do the work that we want to do to improve these customer journeys. And it's often overlooked, I think, in many cases. But by doing this as part of our visioning work and making sure that we are accommodating and considering culture and expertise and processes and automation and all of the things that come with really understanding the people part of the work that we do, it really helps us get ahead of it and make sure that it's deeply integrated into our strategy and roadmaps. So all of this clay that comes out of these kind of visioning sessions that we create and categorized, there's a whole bunch of stuff, right? And so the next really important step that we go through is the prioritization exercise. So that's, again, another really important collaborative exercise. We need business people in the room, we need IT professionals, we need security, we need all sorts of folks who can really help us understand, hey, we need to fix this problem. We think we've got a solution for it. Is this a big lift? Is this a small lift? Is it high value? Is it low value? Like I said, there's a bunch of different frameworks that we create with our clients for figuring out prioritization, but it's an essential step in distilling down what it is that we're actually going to work on and building our roadmap. So not only our low-hanging fruit and immediate things that we think we can solve quickly, high value, low effort, but also what are the things that we are going to reach out to executive teams, clear the path, get folks connected, and combine budgets and timelines and resourcing around some of the bigger lifts so that we can really make the case in the organization to support the CX North Star that we've established. And so once we have these pieces, these kind of the vision pieces, and now we've got some prioritized pieces, we have a really fantastic artifact. We didn't invent this at PK, but we've been really kind of perfecting it over time with our clients. We call it it's called a service blueprint. And what it is it starts to visualize all of these different pieces together. So as you can see, it starts to kind of think about what are the insights and evidence that we've gathered across the journey, and how do they map across that journey, and how do we use those as kind of key justifications for changes that we might make in the future state here. How do we kind of articulate in the center that journey? What does this future state journey actually look like, and what are the changes that we're going to make? And then what is required from us, the front of stage, so that's kind of people and experiences, and then back of stage obviously being kind of deeper technology and back-end systems. And how do we kind of build that kind of the middle tier to be able to extract that and enable that and bring all of that stuff forward. So the service blueprint is really kind of this future-looking, blueprint that will kind of enable us to kind of create our roadmaps. And it's a difficult piece to create, but it's an incredibly valuable piece to create. And as you can imagine, it's a living document, right? We kind of create it with our best run to drive the roadmap, and then we tend to kind of revisit it as we're developing roadmap and as things are changing, and as we're making those improvements as we go, we can kind of come back, revisit it, make updates, kind of enhance as we go. So then the last piece, one last piece. The other really important part of this, of the service blueprint I'm doing on time, I got to kind of catch up here quickly, is we can also now start to plot KPIs. So we can come back to our KPIs and start to plot them here on our roadmap. And I mean, on our service blueprint, and say, remember that piece, like, hey, we want to drive NPS. And so what if we added a little, automatic reward that happened at the end of this process? Perfect. That goes right here. That will impact our KPI. We can justify that with, budget and effort. Perfect. Let's do that. So this tool really becomes a tool for all sorts of folks to use to kind of justify the work. And then lastly, the roadmap, right? So ultimately, the goal here is to get down to the plan and what is it that we're actually going to do, and the people and the processes needed to do that. And so, we'll work together with clients and cross-discipline teams to really plot all of that work out. We've done all of the work. We've aligned about it every step of the way. Everybody should be pretty clear on what it is that we're trying to do here. We've given ample time to kind of visioning and solutioning. We've considered technology. We've ideally gone through the processes of procuring resourcing and budget. And so we now have a real roadmap for achieving our goals here. And then the last piece is what our ultimate goal is, which is to set ourselves up to bring something to market, put the new ideas into the experiences, and then test and learn as we go. So we're not going to throw it in the hole, the beanbag in the hole the first time. It takes practice and process, and we've got to make our way into getting where we go. I think a lot of the work that we do up here obviously gives us a tremendous run at that, and we are very confident usually by the time we're bringing things to market through this process, in that what we've created is the right things and that we've vetted it with customers. But digital and business are incredibly complex, and so we're always looking to set ourselves up for the test and learn at the end. So to sum up, here are your 6 steps. Actually, maybe the last one is not a step per se, it's a destination. Starting with the KPIs, building the current state journey maps, going through that prioritization framework as we're starting to think about future state, turning that future state into a real solid roadmap of where we want to go, building the roadmap, justifying it, getting the resources we need to get the work done, and then finally bringing things to market and testing and learning. We are right on time. That's crazy. Do we have, anybody have any time for any last questions or answers that are needed? Or I can follow up too if anybody wants to send stuff. I'm glad to send out emails back, or however we want to deal with it.
Yes, thanks so much, Marko. Yeah, I will keep the time in mind here. So we'll just go through just a couple of the questions that came through in today's webinar. And of course, if there's any other questions that you wanted to share with our team, we'll of course be sending out a recording of today's presentation to all of our attendees. So please be sure to check out your inbox for further resources. But in the meantime, we do have a couple. We did have an attendee wondering, when working on CX strategies, what client teams do you usually work with?
Yeah, so I'll share that, and then it also looks like there's a question in the chat too that I'll address as well. So I'll go quickly. So client teams, it really varies. Sometimes we'll be working with marketing teams, obviously, who are working on digital experiences. Sometimes we work more closely with the customer service teams and thinking through their customer service processes and enabling them. Frankly, sometimes it'll come through IT, right? And IT will have been tasked with solving some problems. Maybe it's a technology problem and they haven't had a chance to really think about the customer experience part, and they need this piece in order to really justify or make the case or even drive requirements for a new technology investment that they're trying to make. So it really depends on kind of where where it initiates and who really kind of is mandated to solve the problem. The question here in the chat is, how long does it take to run through this for the first time with an organization on a typical engagement? It's a great question. And as you would imagine, it really varies. I think a typical engagement, especially around if you pick kind of one relatively complex journey, it can take say 10 to 12 weeks to really kind of get through all of the pieces. And again, it depends on your ability to get people in a room or on a Zoom. But we can also, we've accelerated them, quite quickly. You can do a lot of this kind of journey state mapping and understanding current state, and then really getting people up to speed on kind of current future state, really within a matter of weeks. And so it really depends on the scale and complexity of the journeys and what you already know, right? If you also have a lot of great insights already about the personas that you're working with, or even the journeys and the technology that you have in place, then you can really accelerate these processes. That said, usually you really want to give it some space and give yourself room to uncover things that maybe you didn't expect. Great.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much, Marko. And thanks everyone for spending time with the PK team today. Like I said, please be sure to check your inbox for further resources in regard to customer experience transformation and in ways that you guys can always contact us to discuss your CX strategy. So with that, we'll leave you for today, and we hope to see you in one of our future webinars.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it. Bye.